The Laura Ingraham Show.
I am coming to you live from the epicenter of gridlock in Southern California. Actually, I'm south of Southern California. I'm in San Diego, California, where I host afternoons at 760 KFMB. In San Diego, I'll be keeping you company for the next few hours as we navigate an incredibly busy time in this country. But it's important that we don't lose sight of the big stuff. It's Thanksgiving. There's plenty to be thankful for, especially when you consider this. A month ago, if you're within the sound of my voice, you were racked with uncertainty. I was racked with uncertainty. We were still a number of weeks away from the election. We didn't know where it was going to go. We didn't know what was going to happen. And think about the amount of change, real, serious change that's happened in this country just in the last month. Really compressed into the last 2 weeks. But when you think about where we were a month ago, a month from Thanksgiving, and how everybody was literally chewing their fingernails and had sleepless nights and panic attacks and all that sort of stuff. And now we have witnessed, I think, one of the most masterful post-election moves by a president-elect, certainly in my lifetime, and I'm sure in many of yours. And I know a lot of you have a lot to say, especially given the news just in the last 24 hours. The sorts of things that you're hearing coming out of this Trump administration to be. And I want to hear from you at 855-40-LAURA, 855-405-2872. Don't forget to follow Laura on Twitter at Ingraham Angle. And you can follow me anytime at Winterble Show. That's WINTERBLE Show. Everybody was popping last night and yesterday afternoon, worrying, wondering, how could Donald Trump take a prosecution of Hillary Clinton off the table? And how dare Donald Trump do this kind of thing in front of a meeting with the New York Times, the literal Death Star of media bias? I mean, there's Palpatine and Darth Vader and the rest of them, Maggie Haberman, and you name it, all those people gathered around the table meeting with Donald Trump, and Donald Trump seems to be absolutely selling out what he promised us, a prosecution of Hillary Rodham Clinton, echoing in the back of our minds still the lock her up chants from so many of the rallies, the comment from then candidate Donald Trump at the debate, it's a good thing you're not in charge of the legal system, because you'd be in jail. When everybody literally leapt out of their seats. It was like an ejection seat moment across the country, and people stood up and they cheered and they banged on the table and they spilled their drinks watching the debate saying, finally, somebody was going to hold Hillary Clinton to account for her crimes against our country. And here comes Donald Trump meeting with the New York Times yesterday. And he says, listen, right now, it's off the table. I'm not looking to prosecute her. They're good people. And everybody went into full panic mode. Twitter blew up. People are emailing. I was getting Facebook comments, full panic setting in. And I'm reading in LifeZet this morning a piece by Matthew Vadum, and he nails it. He nails it. Look, this is Donald Trump, who has zagged when people zigged, gone up when people went down when people cannot pin this guy down in terms of what he's going to do. He is way off the meters on the predictability index. And that works in a huge way to his advantage. All right, let's try a little civics question here. What power does the president have when it comes to a specific legal matter facing an American citizen? Vadum does a great job answering it over at LifeZet.com, and he's 100% right. He can pardon. The president, he cannot bring people into the Oval Office and say, put that guy in jail, put that guy in jail, put that guy in jail, take everything that guy has. You can if you're Vladimir Putin. You can if you're some kind of a strong-arm leader. You can, with apologies to the current administration, you can if you want to direct the IRS to harass and hassle the Tea Party movement out there to make life difficult for them. Sure, you can go that way. But in terms of real, legitimate structural power that the president has when it comes to a prosecution, well, other than appointing Senator Jeff Sessions, a phenomenal pick to the Attorney General job, by the way, and you can tell by the attempted character assassination that's going on, With the exception of that, not much. He can pardon and he can appoint an attorney general. And isn't it interesting when you think about the crimes, and we all believe there were crimes committed by Hillary Clinton as Secretary of State. When you think about the crimes committed by then Secretary Clinton and Hillary Clinton into her post-secretary life, into the life of the candidate, when you think about the violations, right? National security secrets, violating the U.S. Code in a number of instances. Rudy Giuliani's done an amazing job laying this kind of stuff out. But when you consider the violations, it's nothing for a President Donald Trump to deal with. It's nothing for a Vice President Mike Pence after the inauguration to deal with. This is strictly a matter of either bringing a prosecution based on a referral because of perjury in front of the Congress. Right, Jason Chaffetz and company, they can refer stuff, and that was the logjam that we had with Loretta Lynch as the AG, because you knew no matter what went up the pipeline, the AG was going to stop it right there. It was going to absolutely clog that pipe and not allow a prosecution of Hillary Clinton. Or the Attorney General can bring a prosecution of Hillary Clinton because she violated national security law. I mean, it's that simple. It's really no more complicated than that. So your powers are limited if you're Donald Trump. If you're any president who is going to act in accordance with the constitutionally limited powers of the presidency, we don't have an imperial presidency, much to the chagrin of so many in Washington, D.C., much to the chagrin of those people. We don't have an imperial presidency where the president says, "I command thee," boom, and now suddenly magic happens. As Matthew Vadum notes over at LiveSet, it's an empty promise. He can't be held to it. It's meaningless. Short of pardoning her himself, Donald Trump can't definitively state that Clinton won't be further investigated or prosecuted. Presidents don't have that kind of power. Now, what about the motivation behind saying something like this if you're Donald Trump? Why would you say this? Well, look, it's no secret, and I'm sure you'll agree with me, it is no secret that you have a situation in this country today where people are still very divided 2 weeks after this election, 2.5 weeks after this election, right? You only in the last few days saw the end of the idiotic marches through the streets and the protests and the laying down on the road and the hot cocoa and the hug blankets and all that kind of stuff that's going on with the people who are protesting the outcome of the election. Only now are you starting to see those most partisan Hillary supporters on Facebook now posting pictures of Christmas trees and Christmas wreaths and turkey dinners, where a week ago they were screaming for a revolution. They've been tamped down. Why? Because Donald Trump has not played according to their predictable models. Well, we said he wasn't temperamentally suited to be the president of the United States, so of course he's going to act in the way we think. Well, no, not really. Not really. Donald Trump's got a much longer hand he's playing. Think about the things that were promised on the campaign trail. Think about the most important people in the Trumpiverse, the Donald Trump candidacy, the universe that is the Donald Trump post-election period. Who were the people that Donald Trump spoke about time and time and time again? The forgotten man, the forgotten woman, the people who'd been left behind by bad global trade treaties and agreements, people who had been left behind from the opportunity that used to be present throughout this country and now seems to be only available in a bi-coastal fashion. New York, Boston, Washington, L.A., San Francisco, Seattle. That's where the opportunity now exists for the so-called people of this country. The Democratic Party is a bi-coastal party, and that's pretty much what it comes down to. They exist on the coast and on the North Coast there in Chicago, and that's really about it. But the people who make this country work are relying on Trump and the Republicans in the Congress and in the Senate to do something much bigger. United States, enforce the border, tax reform, repatriate overseas cash, blow up NAFTA, blow up TPP, which he announced overnight. All these things are structural changes that have to happen. So if I gave you the list of 15 or 20 things that Donald Trump needs to do, are you telling me the prosecution of Hillary Clinton is the top of the list of the stuff that has to happen? Are you saying that the run-up in the markets, that feeling of optimism overtaking this country right now, is based on the potential of a Hillary Clinton prosecution? No, it's not. It's based on the possibility of real economic growth in this country. People are excited because there's a brighter future coming. Doesn't mean Hillary Clinton is going to skate and avoid prosecution. What Trump is doing, understanding that to build a building, you have to lay a foundation. The foundation of this country has got to be a strong, vibrant, growing economy that gets you a higher GDP than 2% annualized. Yippee skippy. He is building a foundation for this country to grow from. And I don't mean the government. I mean the economy. You need to get that going. Think about a building. You build a foundation, then you build the walls. Then you populate the building. Donald Trump's got a list of priorities that he's working out. And because he says, well, I'm not looking at a prosecutor. We'll see. I'm not inclined to prosecute her right now. That doesn't mean she's going to skate. I want to hear from you. Do you disagree? Call me to task. We'll have the conversation straight ahead. 855-40-LAURA. 855-40-LAURA. 855-405-2872 on Twitter at Ingraham Angle. It is your healthy radio addiction. I am Brett Winterble. Live from America's finest city in San Diego. This is the Laura Ingraham Show.
How are you?
Doing well. What's happening today?
Kind of took the sting out of the point I was going to make because I felt that by bowing out of this prosecution thing, that Donald Trump kind of lost his credibility. But my understanding is that there's been an investigation going into the Clinton Foundation that's been ongoing for a year under the radar.
Right.
And you got a lot of attack dogs, serious people, Jim Jordan and Trey Gowdy and several other people that are not going to let go on this email thing either. And Trey Gowdy's one sharp puppy, so
you're right, and that's the important point, Greg. That's the important point, okay? And this is what we have to keep in perspective. The pressure is going to be brought to bear against Hillary Clinton at some point, right? Number one, Donald Trump's team, Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, has no idea what's in the files of the Justice Department, what sort of evidence they've gotten. Even though Jeff Sessions is in the Senate, he doesn't have access to the evidence. Nobody will until Donald Trump takes the oath, until Sessions is confirmed, his team gets in, they're able to go through these records, sit down in a meeting with James Comey, the FBI director, if he's still there, if he doesn't resign, and say, listen, what do you have? Let me see this evidence. What do you have? Lay it on the table. Let's go through this. That, combined with the stuff that's come out of the House hearings, the House investigation, the testimony, the inconsistent testimony, the evidence that's come out, this is potentially a whole new ballgame. But this is not Donald Trump's job to go and push this. It is Donald Trump's job to execute the oath of office branch of the federal government. So Jordan is a great guy. Jim Jordan's a great guy. Trey Gowdy's a great guy. The people on that committee did hard work, including Mike Pompeo, who's going to be the CIA director. These guys are all going to come out hard, and they're going to put out what they've got. And it's going to be up to an Attorney General, Jeff Sessions, to bring the charges at the right time. But there's no reason for Donald Trump to burn any goodwill, anything like that he's got right now for the benefit, really, and this would be for the benefit of the Clinton partisans. I mean, that's what it comes down to. Let's go out to Greg in Iowa. Greg, how are you? Welcome to the show.
Oh, I'm doing great. My only comment on this whole thing is that anything short of a full pardon leaves the whole prosecution, leaves everything on the table for future access by anyone who wants to push the prosecution.
Let me ask you a question, Greg. When you went in to vote on Election Day, or you did your ballot in advance, a mail-in ballot, however you did it, voted absentee. When you went on in to vote, what was the issue you were pulling that lever for? What was, if I said, if I said, Greg, what's the issue you care about the most? What was it?
In my case, it's jobs and the economy.
Sure.
I want my kids to have jobs in the future.
Right. So you would expect then that a President Trump would come in and say, we're going to focus on the economy. We're going to get the tax rates right. We're going to cut the corporate tax rate. We're going to renegotiate NAFTA. We're going to put people in a position to actually keep more of their money, to have a growth economy, take care of this debt, all that sort of stuff. That doesn't mean just because you favor jobs in the economy, which most people did, that doesn't mean that you are blowing off prosecution, bringing to justice of Hillary Clinton, deporting MS-13 criminal alien gang members that are terrorizing our streets. It doesn't mean you are blowing that off. It means you have priorities, and your priority is towards the economy. The priority is towards jobs. And my contention is the people like Joe Scarborough on MSNBC and Mika Brzezinski, the MSNBC crew, they would love for Trump to come out and say, my first order of business is going to be to put Hillary Clinton in prison. That's the first thing I'm going to do. And he would absolutely torch the opportunity to help get this economy going in the right direction, partnering with Paul Ryan, partnering with Mitch McConnell, and saying, let's get these taxes cut, let's get these regs slashed, all that sort of stuff. I appreciate the call, Greg. I hope you have a very happy Thanksgiving. I've got a ton of people on hold, and we're going to take all your calls. A couple lines open, and I want to hear from you right now as well at 855-40-LAURA, 855-405 from Twitter feed at Ingraham Angle, and check out lifeset.com. It is a real destination for me every time I get up in the morning, pulling my show prep for my own show here in San Diego. I am Brett Winterble, coming to you live from the Studio 760 KFMB in San Diego, California, America's finest city. In just a couple of minutes, we're going to visit John LeBoutillier, former congressman from New York. We're going to get his thoughts on the transition so far, and I want to drill down a little bit. Rudy versus Mitt. Oh, no. Say it ain't so. It's the Brett Winterble in for Laura Ingraham on the Laura Ingraham Show. Your healthy radio addiction.
I'd play Sally Gooden all day if I could, but the Lord and my wife wouldn't take it very good. So a fiddle when I can.
It is Brett Winterble in for Laura Ingraham on the Laura Ingraham Show. As we continue to break down this evolving new administration from Donald Trump, right? He's appointing all kinds of people to the job. Overnight, we found out that Governor Nikki Haley from South Carolina was picked by Donald Trump to be our UN ambassador. So there goes the fake, phony, fraudulent claims. Oh, he's only picking white guys named Mike to be a part of the operation. I want to run out and join my good friend, John LeBoutillier, former congressman from New York. You see him on the Fox News Political Insiders on Sundays on the Fox News channel. John, a happy early Thanksgiving to you. I'm glad you were able to make time for us on the Laura Ingraham Show.
Thank you, Brett. And I heard you were doing the show. I was excited for the listeners and for me, and mostly for you to be, so for the country to hear you, because I'm on your show regularly, happily, and you're a great host.
Thanks, man. I really appreciate that. So I'm going to upgrade you to the position of sitting inside the inner sanctum of the President-elect Trump operation here. And I want to ask you a question based on what you've been observing, okay? It looks like a lot of emphasis on the foreign policy components as we look at these appointments. CIA, Mattis, Nikki Haley, those sorts of things. General Flynn. What about the economic team? I'm not seeing any real movement when it comes to the economic agenda coming out of Team Trump. We know that was probably the number one driver for people to get out there to the polls to look for economic growth. We know Wall Street's been in fuego for the last couple of weeks. What do you think's going on in terms of the slower pace on the economic side?
Great question. It hasn't been talked about in the media at all, really, because of all the big names like Giuliani and Romney and those guys floating around for Secretary of State. But the biggest job besides that is Secretary of the Treasury. And there are three names floating around for that. Steve Mnuchin, who's a Democrat, who was Trump's finance chairman from Goldman Sachs, raised money for Hillary 8 years ago. Very well respected on Wall Street. He's been mentioned the whole time, since before the election, actually, as Secretary of the Treasury. That's one. Another one is this congressman from Texas, Jeb Hensarling, who's a big conservative. He would not be as assuring to Wall Street as Mnuchin would be. And then you keep reading this third name, Jamie Dimon, the head of J.P. Morgan Chase, and you read, now who knows if it's true, that Trump really wants him, but he doesn't want to give up his banking job to come do it.
Right.
So that may be holding things up while they're also clearly focused on Secretary of State, which is the number one cabinet job. And clearly there's a lot of fighting going on over that one. But Treasury is crucial, and I think it'll come pretty quickly after they get this Secretary of State thing done.
All right, so let's head over to the Foggy Bottom sweepstakes there, Secretary of State. We know that it did look like late last week, Mitt Romney may have had an inside track. Everybody headed to Bedminster, New Jersey for the big powwow with Donald Trump and his team. Mitt Romney went there. Appeared to come out of the weekend still being a favored pick, but Rudy Giuliani, who had seemed to fade in the last, say, 7 or 8 days, now surging back to the front of the pack. How do you shake this out? These are two completely different political animals, two people with completely different experiences. I would argue Rudy Giuliani has much broader international experience, given the fact that he was the mayor of New York on 9/11. And this is a guy who regularly interacts with the entire world when you're the mayor of New York. How do you shake these two out?
Well, I actually think Rudy would be better suited to be the director of Homeland Security because of 9/11, because he was the mayor here in New York on 9/11. He's been through it from a local perspective, and he has since been there. What he's been doing is running around the world, consulting with other cities and police forces and municipalities about how to upgrade their security. So security is sort of his bag. Making foreign policy, I don't think, is his bag, and I'm not sure I think he would do very well at it. I think his temperament is he's sort of a one-man band kind of guy, Rudy. I don't see it. I think Homeland Security is where he ought to be. You're not hearing his name for that. They've floated out lately Rudy for Director of National Intelligence. That's possible, but I don't think he's going to get to be Secretary of State. I think it's going to either be Romney, and if there's too much fighting trying to prevent Romney, then I think he'll go for a default candidate like Bob Corker, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee from Tennessee, who Trump likes him. He interviewed him for vice president, and I could see him getting it. I could see that.
Is Mitt Romney going to be in a position, though, to articulate the vision that Trump has on foreign policy? It feels to me like Mitt Romney's the type that would go into a meeting with a Vladimir Putin and say, President Trump wants ... and kind of give Putin a look like, but you don't really have to do it. How do we know Romney is going to be loyal to Trump? And I'm not just saying given the bashing he gave him back at the University of Utah during the primaries, but more than that, this is a guy with a colossal ego who, genuinely believes he should be in that job. I don't know that he respects Trump enough to be this type.
Well, they got to work that out. That's a good point, but they have to work it out between them. If I do not believe Mitt Romney would ever be disloyal to his boss. He's a straight arrow. I don't believe it. If he signs on in public and in overseas, he's going to carry the Trump water. But the biggest part of the job might be helping Trump decide what his foreign policy is. Because just in the last 18 hours, we've witnessed a breathtaking series of reversals on policy issues that Trump took in the campaign. He's now backed off all of them. No more waterboarding. Not going to prosecute Hillary. Open to listening to Obama's global warming arguments. I mean, give him a couple more days, this guy might reverse himself on virtually everything. We don't know. And who is going to be in the room when they formulate foreign policy? Obviously, Trump is in the room. Pence is in the room. Flynn will be in the room. But the Secretary of State and Defense and Treasury are going to be in the room. And we don't know those three yet. And it's crucial. I have no doubt. I have no doubt that Romney will carry out the foreign policy. But like on this Putin thing, this weird relationship that Trump thinks he has with Putin, that Putin's a good guy and all that, we can work with him. That's going to change. He's going to get his comeuppance, and he's going to realize Putin is bad news. See, and for the American president to in any way think that this is a good guy is a big mistake.
Yeah, but I go back to 2000 and George W. Bush, then governor of Texas, running for the presidency. And if you remember, the foreign policy he articulated on that stage with Vice President Gore was America needs a humble foreign policy. That was what he said. He staked his claim. He was going to be a compassionate conservative domestically, and he was going to run a humble foreign policy. Obviously, aggressive moves by Al-Qaeda, the Chi-Coms, et cetera, changed all that. 9/11 changed all that. But the reality is Donald Trump is going to have to stake out a vision. He either believes that we need to build up more nuclear missiles to be a deterrent to the Russians, or he doesn't. He either believes that we need to defend our NATO allies in Europe, or he doesn't. We need to take a much more aggressive stance against China, or we don't, in the South China Sea. And my guess is he's much more pragmatic than an ideologue, and that's what's sort of throwing everybody, because he is going to, I think, articulate a vision based on the given situation facing the country. We may be in a post-doctrine. Doesn't have a doctrine. He just has a series of pivots as a result of circumstances.
Well, that could be, but I mean, he was very specific in the campaign about either getting rid of NATO or changing NATO. Mm-hmm. I will bet you money that he gets rid of all that and sticks with NATO right the way we are today. He's not going to change any of that. He's not going to change it. And
well, I agree with you on that.
What happened here? He said things during the campaign that he got big applause lines in those rallies, but they're based on nothing. Mm-hmm. And he has one meeting with General Mattis on Sunday, and the guy brings up the fact that waterboarding doesn't work, and I can get the terrorists to talk easier with a beer and a pack of cigarettes. And Trump comes out yesterday and says, I'm not for waterboarding now. I mean, the guy doesn't believe in anything. Believes in nothing. Just say something today, and then he'll say something contradictory tomorrow. And that has always been the way of Donald Trump. 8 years ago, he said Hillary would make a great president. He gave her money for her campaigns. And then he says he wants to prosecute her. Now he says, no, they're good people. I don't want to make them suffer. I mean, come on.
Well, I do think it's to be determined on the Hillary prosecution stuff. All right, John LeBoutillier.
It's not to be determined. It's over.
I don't think so. I think it is to be. I think it is to be continued. Is what I would say. Maybe not to be. I think it is to be continued, and we will be talking about this for a number of weeks and months straight ahead, because we don't know what referrals are going to come out of the Congress. We don't know what Jeff Sessions is going to be presented with as an AG. There are a number of.
It doesn't matter when the president says, "I don't want to do it." That means it doesn't get.
Wait, you just told me he's the guy that said he was going to scrap NATO, and now he's not going to scrap. He is a man who is capable of changing his mind.
Yeah, but he changed it and said yesterday, I'm not doing it. So that's it. That's the policy now. We're not waterboarding. We're not prosecuting Hillary. We're now open to global warming the way Obama wants it. That's the new policy. I mean, I hate to tell you, I'm stunned over it, actually. But we're gonna.
I think we're going to see a lot more still straight ahead. All right, John LeBoutillier, Fox News political insiders on Sundays. You got a website or anything you want to mention there, John?
Brett, we could do johnlebout.com, JohnLebout, all one word, johnlebout.com, and political insiders every Sunday night, East Coast time, 7:30 on the Fox News channel. Not this Sunday because of Thanksgiving, but all other ones.
All right. We'll watch you there, man. Safe travels. Happy Thanksgiving, and we'll reconnect on the other side, all right?
Great, Brett. Great to talk to you. Happy Thanksgiving to you and everybody listening.
All right. Outstanding. Congressman John LeBoutillier checking in. So, he opened up the can of worms, and we will pursue this. Do you think Trump is flipping on everything? I think he's adjusting. This is a guy who's going to adjust. Business operate in a static way. They don't stay in a static place. Circumstances change. Markets change. Business dynamics change. And if you continue to go straight towards that iceberg, you're going to end up with a titanic mess on your hands. So if you need to strategically move, or if you need to use tactics to move, when you get new information, I don't think it is. There's a lot to consider when you're a candidate for the presidency of the United States, and then you're presented with the actual stories that will directly impact your governance. Does it cause you to lack confidence? Because it does not cause me to lack confidence. He is not sworn in yet. He's the president-elect, and he's sharing his thinking rather than doing stuff in secret behind closed doors. And I think that is fundamentally a healthy thing. I want to hear from you right now. 855-40-LAURA, 855-405-2872. On Twitter, you can hit me up at Winterble Show. That's WINTERBLE Show. Don't forget to follow Laura Ingraham on her Twitter feed at Ingraham Angle for all the best analysis and news stories out there. Got a bunch of people that want to weigh in. We're going to go to you straight ahead, plus your phone calls as well. I am Brett Winterble. We're live in America's finest city on the left coast in San Diego, where the sun is just starting to come up. It's Brett Winterble in for Laura Ingraham on your healthy radio addiction. At least a winning opportunity to sit in for somebody whom I greatly admire, and a great audience as well. Let's get out and talk to some of them. Let's talk to Jim checking in from Florida. Jim, how are you? Happy early Thanksgiving. What's on your mind today?
Real quick, two things. I went to a couple of Trump rallies. The crowd was chanting, lock her up. Trump would always say, no, we'll get our justice by retiring the Clintons. He would never go along with the lock her up. He would listen to it, and then he'd say, no, we'll get our justice by locking them up. And second point I'd like to make is nobody's serious about immigration at all. You can cure it all by enforcing one law that's on the books. If you started fining employers, which is on the books, you wouldn't have to deport a single soul. You wouldn't have to disrupt anything.
Yep. You are 100% right, Jim. And if I could go into the virtual prize closet and give you a virtual prize, I would do it, man. I really would. You have earned yourself a second helping of stuffing there at the Thanksgiving feast, because you're exactly right. The way you choke this off is you punish the employers. They're the violators. They're the people who knowingly hire people who are not in the country legally, and that is exactly how you turn that spigot off. Thank you so much, Jim. I hope you have a happy Thanksgiving. Adam in Arizona, beautiful Arizona. How are you, Adam? Adam? Okay, yeah, let's move on to Shar in Michigan. Shar, welcome to the show. How are you, Shar?
I'm great, thanks. I just want to say I do believe what you're saying. I think Trump is getting his group together, making a plan. Any business, you've got to start with a foundation, and you are right. I think that's what he's working on, so that when he takes over in office, he is ready with his plan, and that way he can just shoot in all kinds of directions if he's got his men set and his plan going. And I'm very excited that his wife is going to work on the family situation.
Right.
Your healthy radio addiction starts now.
Power to the people!
The Laura Ingraham Show.
I've got to admit, it's getting better. It's a little better.
I think it is getting better. It's Brett Winterble in for Laura Ingraham on your healthy radio addiction. I'm getting pummeled on Twitter from people, great Laura Ingraham listeners who are pummeling me on Twitter. People like Almanac, Sally Smith. They're saying Donald Trump is selling out the conservatives. He's selling us out. He's blowing us up. He is in a very, very bad place right now because he's pivoting towards leftist positions. I don't think so. Look, Do you believe, answer this question for yourselves, do you believe Donald Trump is an ideologically driven president to be, or is he a pragmatically driven president to be? I would argue what you have seen from Barack Obama for the last 8 years is what the worst in an ideological president would be. I mean, driven at every turn by hard left ideology. Trump, I think, is surveying the ground, and he's calling the plays accordingly. You know those coaches in the NFL that post 2-14s and 3-13s and 4-12 seasons every year? And then you look at the coaches that are dynamic in their offenses and they kind of move it around and they figure out that things are changing. I want a guy who's able to recognize, okay, at this time we need to do this. I don't need to check every single box that hits a particular ideology and the country be damned. I want a guy who's going to make the call on the field, who's willing to call an audible at the line. I don't think he's selling the conservatives out. He just blew up TP. He's going to do immigration. He's working over NAFTA. He's rehabbing taxes. You're looking at a guy who I think is working for the best interests of this country. I got a lot of people on hold. I am Brett Winterble coming out of San Diego, KFMB, in for Laura Ingraham. Let's talk to Ricardo in Tennessee. How's it going in the volunteer state, Ricardo?
Buenos dias, Brett, and going great. Thanks for letting me in. Hey, before I tell you why Shrillery will be indicted, I just want to say my two favorite phrases for 2017 are going to be World Series champion Chicago Cubs and President Trump. Take that, Southside liberals. But real quick,
very nice.
Shrillery will be indicted, and here's why. One of the problems we had with Obama was using the DOJ, the IRS, and the NSA against his rivals. Do we really want that from Trump? No. So it's important for Trump to separate himself from Clinton and from this investigation, and the media is playing right along like the suckers they are. The Attorney General and the FBI will continue this investigation, and by then the media will have helped Trump separate himself from the situation. It's absolutely brilliant in my book.
Dynamite point, and you nailed it, Ricardo. Enjoy your Chicago Cubs World Series championship there. You're exactly right. This is going to be the purview of the FBI and the DOJ. Trump doesn't need to get involved in this. We just saw what happens when a president and when the executive branch gets involved in these investing your hands. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Let's talk to Lillian in California. Lillian, how are you?
Well, I'm just actually confirming what your previous caller was saying. Mr. Trump is prioritizing. There's no doubt in my mind that Mrs. Clinton will not be prosecuted. He will keep his word, but he will do it through his appointees to the DOJ, the FBI, and the Attorney General would be right there doing the work.
Mm-hmm. That's what they got to do. It's the job. Their job is to enforce the laws. The president's job is to execute the laws, and that's exactly right, Lillian. A happy Thanksgiving to you. Kevin in Indiana. Kevin, how are you? How are things in the Hoosier State for you?
Oh, well, you know, this is great with our first choice on so many fronts there at the heartbeat away, where we couldn't be happier. In essence, and regarding, you know, we're all facing our uniquely famous holiday of thanks tomorrow, and the way forward there is just to, all these previous callers have, well, not all of them, many have said, the ship is righted considerably, and basically, I think the metaphor for around the Thanksgiving table, drawing the horns, give the losers some hope. They aren't idiots. They know that the ship needs to keep sailing, and I think the right metaphor for Trump right now is Captain of the Mayflower. You know, we don't hear much about the captain of the Mayflower. It's just the ones who arrived cheaply, plus or minus. And it wasn't the fault of the captain and crew. They had to keep doing stuff.
I love this. Kevin, I love this. It's a great analogy. You don't ever hear about the captain of the Mayflower. And a happy Thanksgiving to you right there on Plymouth Rock. You're exactly right. It is a great point. Thank you for the call. It's exactly right. We have to be thankful. We are in a radically different place today than we were 30 days ago. Think about where you were on October 23rd, freaking out, worrying. Look at how much more optimistic the country is. And the reality is the economy, the feeling out there is that it's turning in the right direction, and it will even benefit. It will even benefit with for the libs out there. Chuck in beautiful Utah. Chuck, how are you? What's on your mind today?
Great. How are you?
Doing great.
I just wonder how some of these guys get to be political experts and political pundits, because I don't think they listen very well. I listened quite well. I read a lot during the primaries and the general. And I think what Trump does is he takes kind of the most extreme position to negotiate. And I don't remember him ever saying he wouldn't do waterboarding. I remember him saying that waterboarding was on the table.
Right.
And I think that's the way he does things. He puts those things on the table. He doesn't promise they're always going to be on the table, but it's a starting point. It's a negotiating point, and people are way too emotional. Even people who support Trump, which I do, are way too emotional about every word that comes out of his mouth.
Yep.
Watch what he does more than what he says. And I'm like you. I'm so thankful, and I think we're going to have a whole different country in 4 years. I remember when Reagan got elected, the mood of the country was pretty bad before he got elected, and 4 years later it was in a whole different place.
It sure was. Chuck, thank you so much, and a blessed Thanksgiving to you. You're exactly right. I was talking with my wife last night. We're watching some TV, and thank you for the call. I was watching TV with my wife last night, and she looked at me. She goes, I've been out there in the stores. We've been walking around. It feels a lot like it's 1979 all over again, 1980, 1981. It does. In fact, for you country music fans out there, I even fired up a little Merle Haggard Rainbow Stew concert because it does feel like the country's changing towards the better direction. But the reality is it's a dangerous world out there right now. And so what I want to do, coming up next, bring in my very good friend. You know him from American Sniper. You know him from the Ghost Sniper series. And he's also got a brand new book coming out as well. I want to talk to him about the dangerous state of the world today. He is Scott McEwen. He's going to check in with us straight ahead. And I want to take your phone calls as well. It is Brett Winterble sitting in for Laura Ingraham on your Healthy Radio Addiction. 855-40-LAURA. 855-405-2872. Straight ahead on the Laura Ingraham Show. World, what do you say we get an update from Scott McEwen? Scott, how are you, man?
Good, Brett. Thank you for having me on.
It's good to have you here. So we live in an insanely dangerous world. ISIS wants to bomb the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade. We're facing threats at every turn. What are we going to do? What is Donald Trump going to do to defeat the menace that is radical Islamist ideology?
Well, I think you started out on the right foot by defining the menace. And the menace is exactly that. It's this group of radical jihadis that are coming from the Islamic State and others such as that are attacking, not only our Western world cities in Europe and here in the United States, but are also terror. They've got 5,000 fires.
Hey, Scott, hold on one second, man. You may have moved like an inch or two in the wrong direction. We're going to reconnect with you here. See, this is the beauty of technology today. You know what's going on? Everybody's on their cell phones telling Grandma that they're going to be a little bit late in the traffic. That's what it is, and they're using up all the cell service. So we're going to reconnect with Scott McEwen. I like what he said, though. Trump has done a good job of defining the menace, defining the threat that we're facing here, not just as a country, but I would argue civilizationally. I would argue we are facing a threat unlike any other. And certainly 9/11 underscored the real dangers that we would face, that an enemy would either be present inside our nation, plot and scheme to kill us, or would get into our nation after plotting and scheming and then would kill us, or in some cases would radicalize our own people among us. I'm thinking people like Nidal Hassan, Mr. Workplace Violence, as he yelled Allahu Akbar, mowing people down at Fort Hood. So, Scott, you were saying that the President-elect Donald Trump has done a very good job redefining or defining the threat in front of us, but teaming up with a guy like Mattis and Pompeo and the rest of these guys, what's he going to do to kill these bad guys?
Well, that's exactly the question that we have now is how do we proceed with eliminating the threat? And that's really what we must do. And I think what we've seen now in Mosul, and I was just saying in Iraq, really kind of defines this new world of terrorism that we have. These guys have now embedded themselves in a town that they took over 2 years ago, for example. 5,000 or less are taking on 100,000 troops from various parts of the world, including 5,000 U.S. military, and they're holding them off basically in a suicide defense with use of civilians as cover for drones, if you will, in front of the bad guys. And also they've re-armored a group of vehicles there that are almost something out of Mad Max because they can't stop them as they go in and suicide bomb the troops trying to take them out. It's really a dangerous world we have because the enemy doesn't understand any value of human life. All they understand is kill the other guy before they die themselves.
One of the guys who's been at the forefront of this effort in fighting the bad guys for a very, very long time is your writing partner in this case, your very good friend, Ryan Zinke. And you and Ryan have teamed up here together to write American Commander, serving a country worth fighting for and training the brave soldiers who lead the way. What an amazingly timely thing to write now, given the fact that we're going to have to revamp our military, revamp our intelligence gathering. We're going to have to rethink the way we fight this fight and get rid of the ideas of rules of engagement, the way they've been interpreted for 8 years. Get rid of the ideas of giving, basically giving tells to our enemies, what our date certains will be, things like that. Talk a little bit about this book that's coming out here in a couple of days.
One of the reasons I'd like to write this book with Ryan Zinke, an American Commander, I believe, is the follow-up to American Sniper, is that Ryan trained men like Chris Kyle, Marcus Luttrell, was in charge of making these warriors ready to go to battle. And Ryan has the attitude that was instilled in books like American Sniper, Lone Survivor, and that is that, look, you got to take the fight to the enemy, and you cannot quit in that fight with the enemy. Ryan Zinke will not send troops into battle that are not prepared to fight the battle and have rules of engagement to decisively win. PC is done. We are dealing with an enemy that will kill us and kill our troops. And I think on this day before Thanksgiving, I'd like to say that the United States should recognize that we have many men and women in harm's way on various parts of this planet defending us. And I want to give them, and Ryan wants to give them, the rules of engagement that will allow them to decisively win. And that's really what we wrote about in American Commander, is that the United States now has to wake up, get over this 8 years of sleep that we've had with this Obama administration, and understand that it's time to win and give our troops the opportunity to do so.
It is McEwen, and I recommend his work highly. If you loved American Sniper with Chris Kyle, if you've loved the Ghost Sniper books, the series, I would recommend for you as you begin your holiday shopping to get American Commander, get a copy for yourself, put it under the tree for your loved ones. It is time to refocus on the threat at hand. Scott, I wish you all the best. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll hook up on the other side. Thanks for stopping by on the Laura Ingraham Show, man.
Thank you, Brett. Same to you. Happy Thanksgiving.
Thanks a lot. That's Scott McEwen. And it is so great to see someone like Scott do the work he does, celebrating the heroism of the people who go in and fight the dragons. You know, I've long said when you talk about outlets like the New York Times, they will write articles about people who serve in our armed forces under one of two conditions: when that person is a victim of the system, or when that person is a perpetrator of an injustice. But you do not see big headline stories in the New York Times that say, Marine Corps commander does great work with community. No, they'll say, the system has turned his back on him. He's become an alcoholic or a drug addict. He went on a shooting rampage. They'll write those stories all day long, but they will the heroism of the men and the women out there in this country who defend this nation at every turn. And we are thankful for those men and women who go to those dark places, into those caves, and fight those dragons. Brett Winterble in for Laura Ingraham. 855-40-LAURA, 855-405-2872 on your Healthy Radio Addiction. Let's jump out. Oh, let me talk to Melanie in Massachusetts. Beautiful Massachusetts, the birthplace of Thanksgiving. How are you, Melanie?
Oh, right. I have a little bit of time off so I can call in, and I wanted especially to thank Scott McEwen for his guest hosting job he did and the fabulous guests he had to speak with about their deep courage and heroism for what they do as their day job. It's just so humbling to hear people like that. I'm pulling over now so I don't go into a dead cell zone. I told you, you know how that goes. I told your programmer that I'm curious, Brett, what your thoughts are on, I know the InfoWars thing and Alex Jones, you've kind of had some fun with, and I've been listening to his visiting guest, Steve Pieczenik, and don't know if you have a take on Pieczenik's formulation of what's going on with this with this bloodless revolution.
Yeah, well, look, here's what I'll say, and I'll say this: terms like revolution are thrown around a lot, and the inclination is to always say, well, if you've got a revolution, it's necessarily an all good thing or an all bad thing. The great thing about our country, the beautiful thing about this country, is we are ever transforming, right? We are always moving in a given direction, and sometimes it's the wrong direction. I think for the last 8 years, we've gone in an incredibly wrong direction. But we always have a chance to right it. We always have a chance to turn it around. And I feel incredibly hopeful about this revolution, this transformation in this country. I feel great about it. Thank you for the call, Melanie. I feel optimistic, and I think many of us do. Brett Winterble in for Laura Ingraham on the Laura Ingraham Show. 855-40-LAURA, 855-405-2872 to be a part of the discussion. Also, check out lifeset.com. It is a great news source for you out there. And look, we talk a lot about the domestic political fights that are going on here with this new administration coming in with Donald Trump. But let's not forget what tomorrow really is. It's Thanksgiving, and it's not giving thanks to the big retailers for their amazing Black Friday sales that start on Thanksgiving Day. It's not about that at all. It's about thanking God for where we are, for the blessings in our lives. And for many, it's a secular holiday. For others, it is a holiday rooted in the deepest faith imaginable. And I thought how appropriate to bring on my very good friend from the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. We're all out here on the left coast, on the west coast, behind the blue curtain. And he is Father Bill Nicholas from the Archdiocese of L.A. And I wanted to get his thoughts from a spiritual perspective, from a faith perspective, a Catholic perspective of Thanksgiving. Father Bill, thanks for getting up mighty early and joining us here on the nationwide Laura Ingraham Show.
Hey, Brett, thanks for having me. It's good to see you. Good
Appreciate
to hear you.
it. It's good to be heard by you and by everybody else. So let me ask you this. Thanksgiving, in many places, it represents the start of the Christmas shopping season. It represents big Black Friday sales, things like that. But let's talk about the underlying faith component here. How this is not just a holiday, but a holy day for many people.
Well, yeah, it's interesting because, when you look at the other holy days like Christmas, which has at its heart Christianity, there would be no Christmas without Christianity. Thanksgiving, while we also see it celebrated in other countries, is very much a part of the American fabric. Thanksgiving, when you think about it, the most traveled day is today, and all these people are traveling to get to some place to share a meal, and it's the same meal. And it's not really a generic giving thanks. It speaks to the heart of the fact that we are a Judeo-Christian and an essentially religious society. I mean, atheists may celebrate Thanksgiving, but you don't give thanks to karma. You're giving thanks to something and to someone. Thanksgiving is people giving thanks to someone. It's directed. And it speaks to the fact that we are at heart a religious society in this country. And at various times throughout history, before and even after it was declared a national holiday, you had even presidents such as Abraham Lincoln in, I believe it was 1864, shortly after he was reelected in the midst of civil war, first time we ever saw that in a democratic society in history, and shortly after William Sherman's victories, he declared a national day of thanks because he could see that the Union was being preserved and was giving due credit to someone obviously looking out for this country.
We know
and
that
so people get together.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah, so people get together and they give thanks, whether religiously or not. I mean, like I said, you don't give thanks to nothing. You don't give generic thanks. Sometimes it irritates me the practice people have of going around the table saying, I'm thankful for this. But essentially, we're giving thanks to someone. And in at least the Catholic Church, I don't know about other Christian churches, people come to Mass at the morning of Thanksgiving.
Right.
It's not a holy day of obligation. It's not really a Catholic feast. But we're directing our thanks to someone, and here in the parish where I'm serving, and in every parish I've ever served, there's always been a special time for Mass in which many people come to celebrate Mass before going off on the rest of their Thanksgiving.
What about this idea that that freedom and what we see in the Constitution, specifically the Bill of Rights enshrined therein, these freedoms are God-given freedoms and liberties, right? They are conferred upon us. We know from the writings in the Declaration of Independence. We know from looking back at historical documents, back to the time of the settling of New England, the Pilgrims coming in. We know Squanto is a key character here. In this, we know that the ending of slavery on this continent was driven by people of faith, by Catholics, by the abolitionist movement, things like that. We are a deeply religious nation, and intertwined in that is a deeply observant nation where we are thankful for our blessings.
No, that's correct. That's correct. You point out the whole issue of slavery in this country, and I like to point out, yes, it is a blight on our history. But when you think about it, since our Constitution, 2/3 of our history has been without slavery, and slavery would not have been abolished were it not for Christianity, because abolition was at its heart a Christian movement. Civil rights was at its heart a Christian movement, and so the presence of faith and religion in this country has been essential. And that's what the Founding Fathers wanted. They may not have been themselves religious. Some of them were. One of them was even Catholic, Charles Carroll. But it was their intention that religion be something that is free. And when we speak of the separation of church and state, and you look at the context in which Thomas Jefferson actually coined that phrase, the separation of church and state, he also quotes that portion of the First Amendment, that Congress is to make no law establishing a religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Basically, separation of church and state is not a protection of the state from religion or from the church. It's actually a protection of the church from the state, so that the church can freely exercise and practice, even publicly, because the Founding Fathers believed in order for democracy of this kind to survive, or a democratic republic to survive, you needed people of real religious principle who would cast their vote, not to enforce or impose a faith, but to have a moral foundation from which they can influence the future of this country. And I certainly saw that in this particular election. Let's face it, with people on both sides of the electoral question between Mr. Trump and Mrs. Clinton, people really offering prayers for the country in this election. And, some, of course, obviously were relieved and others were not. This wouldn't be the first time in which the country was divided, in which both sides were offering prayers to God for an outcome. The Civil War, you certainly saw that. But even at this election especially, and as a priest, I had a lot of people saying that they actually found themselves praying as we were going into this election. That God would somehow guide the outcome of this election, and God's will is usually determined in hindsight. In many cases, it's easy to spike the ball and say, "Yes, this is what God wanted." But things like that are often done, at least in the Catholic Church and in the Jewish tradition, in terms of looking back and seeing how it was guided in the past. But still, people's faith came out, and here in the parish, we had a morning mass. We prayed for guidance of the country on an election day. I know a lot of my friends on Facebook put up prayers and reminders of God's will. And then, of course, people went to the ballot box and they voted. And I always like to say the only control any individual has in any election is their individual vote. God is fair game on anything beyond my own personal control, and even there, that's doubtful. He can work through individuals like myself. And I cast my vote and put it in the hands of the voters, and ultimately in the hands of divine providence, as some people call it, or God, as I like to refer to it, for the future of this country. And we always hope for the best. But at its heart, it's a very religious country. And as respectful as religious people can be for atheists, we hope even atheists can be respectful for the religious views of other people.
And it is so interesting because at the heart of the Judeo-Christian faith traditions, right, Catholicism, the mainline Protestantism in this country, the Jewish traditions, at the heart of all of this, Father, is the notion of free will, that we have a free will choice to follow our conscience. And on Election Day, there is no greater expression of freedom and liberty than the free will to vote and to cast your lot. And I think symbiotic relationship between the free will at the ballot box, I almost said the battle box, the free will at the ballot box, and the free will we have on this coming up into this Thanksgiving to give thanks to God. We have the free will that has been granted to us.
Oh yeah, and the founding fathers recognized that, and wanted people. Even look at early documents of the nation, the Northwest Ordinance, which occurred during the Articles of Confederation in the years leading up to the Constitution. The Northwest Ordinance says very clearly that education and faith being essential, they instructed that schools and churches be built and fostered in what was that time the Northwest Territory. And so even then, in the ordinance, it is stating they want religion to be a part of the society that is being founded without actually imposing a state religion. People are free to worship as they want, but they wanted religion to be especially free, and that is why in the First Amendment, among all the freedoms, freedom of religion is the first of those freedoms, and which is why in many ways you look at how many on some factions in the nation today are interpreting that. They're interpreting, religion, you're free to practice your religion, but then they classify it and they say, but only in the home or in the church, in privacy. Well, when you apply that to the other freedoms of the First Amendment, it really doesn't make any sense. We have freedom of speech, but only in the home and in the church, and then private. You have freedom to assemble, but only in the home and in church and in private. You have freedom of the press, but only in the home and in the church and in private. It doesn't make any sense. But we only apply that classification to freedom of religion. And actually the First Amendment is we can freely practice that religion. The state can't impose it. As Christians, one of our tasks is to preach and to evangelize. People are free to choose to convert or to embrace Christianity or not. It's the state that can't do that, the state that can't enforce a religion on people. But people of faith can certainly participate in government, and their religious principles, their morals, their sense of justice can certainly be applied to how the state is run. Freedom of religion and separation of church and state is actually a protection of the church from the state, not the state from the church. And so that's an interesting thing to keep in mind. We don't impose a faith on people. Certainly as Christians, I have no desire that Christianity or Catholicism be the official state religion of the United States. But we certainly work toward a Judeo-Christian society in which those values are the norm. And hopefully our leaders in Congress, in the presidency, even in the courts, justice is certainly can be seen in a religious sense, while not necessarily Christian, but a sense of justice is beyond us. It's a generic sense that there's something out there higher than us that we try to conform our lives to, and religion helps to refine that. We understand it as Christians, as Jewish people, and people of other faiths, and that can certainly be a part that participates in the government. It's just the government cannot impose that on the citizens. A form of religion.
Father Bill Nicholas, he's with the arts. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this, Father. For all the people who are listening to us across this country, traveling today, could you give everyone out there a Thanksgiving blessing to travel safe and to get where they got to go?
Well, sure, and blessing and patience for all those traveling today. Today perhaps is one that can try people's patience, but to remember the blessings that we have of liberty and of freedom, and as our Declaration of Independence says, these are blessings and freedoms and rights given to us not by a government or a court, but they're given to us by our Creator, and our Creator that is God, that is the Creator of the world, Creator of nature, that our Founding Fathers referred to as divine providence, and to always remember where we get our freedoms ultimately, and pray that our new leaders in our government will work to protect those freedoms that we receive from God, and that I ask that the blessing of God come down upon all people to remember just where we get these freedoms that we are giving thanks for tomorrow in Thanksgiving, and that hopefully it will lend patience and safe travel to all those who are traveling today.
Father Bill Nicholas, thank you so very much. God bless you. We'll talk after the Thanksgiving holiday. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, and happy Thanksgiving.
You too. Father Bill Nicholas, Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Got a lot of people on hold. We'll get out there to those calls straight ahead. I'm Brett Winterble. I'm sitting in for Laura Ingraham. It's the Laura Ingraham Show, your healthy radio addiction. And also you can check out my Facebook page, Brett Winterble Show, and stay in touch there. Let's jump back out of the phones. Let's talk to Julie in Nevada. Julie, how are you? What's on your mind today?
Well, I was driving to work today, and we're all thankful every day, but tomorrow is really a special day because to me, it's a miracle that Trump got in. It's an overwhelming, great feeling. I can't even go and think the other way of how you would feel if it went the other way. And I just want to just say that it's just being thankful, and there is a God. I'm Catholic, and it's just it's like a miracle to me.
Remember that feeling when you went and voted, and you put
yes,
okay, it's that it's that feeling.
I mean, it's just it's. I've been married 38 years happily, and I said to my husband, it was like the best day of my life when I heard that he won.
All right, Julie in Nevada, that's great. That's a great call. Let's talk to Crystal in Oklahoma, beautiful Oklahoma. Crystal, how are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. What's on your mind?
Well, I have three quick comments. One, I agree with the lady that just called, but from a previous caller, I'd like to say regarding the American Sniper, love that movie and the other movie, 13 Hours, great movies. I'm from a red state, not one blue county. I'd like to let you know that, and that I am optimistic about the future. And for the first time, I'm buying my first American flag to fly, honoring our country and its veterans. I'm in the healthcare field. I see how veterans are treated, and I'm ready for a change for them. And also, I'd like to say regarding your question whether the president-elect is either pragmatic or ideological, I believe he is pragmatic, and he is not going to go along with the status quo. He is surrounding himself with people who are competent advisors for whatever.
You are right. He is pragmatic. You're right. He's pragmatic. Right. He's not ideological. I got to shut it down here, folks. Listen, here's the deal. Coming up next hour, you're going to have a special Monday to keep you company. I want to thank so much the great team here at the Laura Ingraham Show. I'm Brett Winterble. It's your healthy radio addiction, the Laura Ingraham Show.